Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. My name is TJ Schneckloth. I am the very proud superintendent for Davenport Community School District. You are here tonight for our community listening session. Tonight with us, we have our partners from Bray Architects. The district set on a journey to create a long-range facility plan a year ago. And we did extensive interviews and landed with Bray Architects. Today, the CEO and owner of Bray Architects, which is a Midwest firm, is with us, Matt. And the person leading us through this work has an office here in town, and that's John Mann. And so we're very fortunate to have them. They have wonderful demographers. They have been working with every city developer, Bluegrass, Buffalo, Walcott, and Davenport, to see, are the cities growing? Where is the growth occurring? And they've gone and done extensive work that you're going to see tonight. Tonight you're going to start with a little recap of where we've been, because it's really important for you to know if you have not been paying attention or following along with where we are, where we're going, then you're going to see that. And so this is really, really important to us. Tonight's event is streamed online. The previous one is streamed online as well, and stored online. We have a spot on our website where we house all of our information that has occurred up to this point, and we're going to continue to do that. We have a spot on our website where people can give feedback. We receive all of those feedback on Thursday night are put into a database, and our board members are going to read every comment. And so they've committed to that. We're committed to that. Tonight, there's going to be lots of comments, questions, feedback. So our check-in form for you is actually at your table. So we highly encourage you to put your name on this sheet and then capture your comments. And we're going to take those and upload those and make sure that our school board sees those comments as well. Tonight with us, we have school board members. If you're a school board member, please stand up. All three of these people actually like a lot of attention put on them, and just kidding. What you say means a lot, and if I could speak for them, there's been no decision made. There's been no plan behind the scenes to work through. What we've had to do is we've created a facility masters planning committee, and they helped us go through the pathways. And then we have to start somewhere, and this is our start somewhere. I will tell you, I have a great sense of urgency about this work. This is work that should have been done 5 to 10 years ago and wasn't. We are going to move this district forward, and here's why. Right now, as you'll see, we have 3,000 to 5,000 open seats in this district. There are neighboring districts around us that if they were to close, we could absorb every student in there without adding a building. We need to become more operationally efficient. What are the results of that? We need to also reinvest into our buildings. Our teachers, our students, our staff, they deserve to have the best facilities. We right now have specials teachers that are going up and down the highway because we have too many buildings. And our numbers are not growing. They're actually declining. You're going to see these things. The work that's gone into this, I'm incredibly proud of. And now it's time to get input. And the input's going to continue to come. You're going to see a survey that's going to go to every house in this district. Not just families, every house that's going to outline this plan. That's one of the reasons why we hired Bray, is that they ensure that they reach out to every community member. So I know that these conversations are not easy, and many of you are not happy in this room, but I guarantee you I want to hear your voice, and so does our school board members want to hear your voice. And so tonight, the structure that we're going to have, there's going to be a presentation, and then there's going to be time to table talk. So if you would like to join us a table with some friends, that's an educator term, with other community members to help with conversation, that would be great. So with that, without saying any more, thank you so much for being here. It's incredibly important. I think it's also important to know who's in the room. Raise your hand if you are a staff member. Raise your hand if you are a community member, parent. Okay. So parents, I want you to know that your voice matters, and sometimes we can overshadow that. I want you to speak up today. All right. So, and staff, your voice matters as well. And so we want to hear from you. So the flow for tonight, John will present. We'll give you table time to talk, and then we'll give you time to respond out. And we are actually capturing a lot of the things that you are going to say, all the things that you're going to say. Danielle Heller is going to be our official note taker. She works in my office, and she's outstanding. So that's going to be the flow for tonight. The last one took 3.5 hours, and so we've trimmed back some of the meat. We also got some really good feedback from the last session, and we've made some changes. So without further ado, let's move forward. And John, thank you for leading us through this tonight. You have a mic, correct?
I do. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. So TJ kind of walked through the agenda, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. If you want to click forward. Part of this is giving you a lot of information because this is a long and complicated process, and we want to give you information that the various planning committees have been using to help influence some of the decision-making that's been done. So what is Davenport School District? It is a district that has over 530 acres of property in its holding. That property extends beyond the buildings that it houses on properties, but when we talk about buildings, there's 39 individual buildings within the district. 29 of those are education buildings. So there's 10 district-owned properties that serve the purpose of whether it's operations, storage, equipment, production of goods and services that are used in the district. The other 29 are broken up into education centers. There's elementary schools, junior highs, high schools, and children's villages. I'll go into what those are in just a second. When you chart all of the district-owned buildings on a map, if you picture the Google map of our area, the darkened area is the boundary of the school district. So everyone that lives within that area is considered eligible for enrollment in the school district. Those buildings are charted by the same color dot that was on the prior slide. So the buildings that are educational in nature, there are 17 elementary schools that are currently organized as pre-K through 6th grade. There is one K through 8 school that is a kindergarten through 8th grade. There are 4 junior high schools currently housing 7th and 8th graders, 3 high schools with 9 through 12, 1 specialized high school with 9 through 12, and then there are 3 children's village centers also in the district. So as I explained, this is a really long process. It started back in 2021 and is expected to go all the way through the end of this year. So if we click forward one slide, we can talk a little bit about how we've gotten to where we're at. So back in June of 21, the district requested proposals from consulting firms to assist with a long-range master plan. In August of 21, Bray Architects was selected after going through an interview process. We immediately kicked this project off in September. At that time, we made arrangements for a couple of things. One was establishing a set of regular meetings that would occur between the consulting firm and the school district. We established a long-range master plan committee. This is a committee that meets on a bi-weekly basis. There are 2 board members on that committee that provide regular update to the board, which occurs every other week, 2 times a month for board update. In October of 21, we presented a planning process to the board, which was adopted. And in that process was established something called a facility master plan committee. We'll explain more what that is in a little bit. That facility master plan committee, or I'm going to abbreviate it as FMPC because it's a mouthful, That is made up of one staff member and one parent from every building in the district. They were charged with creating a pathway to recommend to the school board, which would be influential in the decision-making of how the master plan is created. At the same time, in November, we conducted a facility study, an enrollment study, a capacity study, and then we made a presentation of findings in February of 2022. So from November through February was a bunch of intensive research and report building for that presentation. From November through May, the FMPC went through a series of intensive planning meetings which helped them organize their thoughts to make a recommendation to the board. We'll talk what that recommendation is a little later in this presentation. Once we got through that FMPC recommendation, then our team and the school district, which included several different planning teams, began intensive planning sessions which were intended to help create the organization and facility changes that would become recommended as part of a long-range master plan. There was an initial draft presented in July 11th, and now we're in the process of gathering information so that we know how to change course, refine, modify, so that we can continue to work on this long-range master plan. So what does that mean? We started in August of 21. We're in August of 22. We're a year in, and we still have several months to go. This is not a quick process. There's a lot of information, and there's still more information to build on this. So, what is an enrollment projection study? We had a consulting partner, MD Roffers and Associates. They assisted with this, but before we even started that, we looked back at historical enrollment data within the district. Going back as far as 1975, the district had over 23,000 students within the district. Projecting all the way into 22, we had a district enrollment last year of just slightly over 14,000 students. That's a loss of over 9,000 students over that period of time. So that is critical. Also occurring during that time, there have been building additions, expansions, renovations. The district has physically grown with land holdings and property holdings, but the district enrollment has shrunk. So that's something to keep in mind. For the enrollment projection, that's to say, how do we get from 2021-22 to 10 years in the future? So the demographer took the entire district map, which is on the right side here. They broke it into 87 different neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods were not arbitrarily built. They were built based on key information that would help understand critical information related to the people that live within those neighborhoods, whether they have students who are enrolled in the district, will continue to have students enrolled in the district. What does that mean for the growth within the district? So what does that mean? Well, they, through their research, predicted that the district will be looking at over 750 student enrollment decrease over the next 10 years. So about 75 students per year. Their recommendation is that based on the historical enrollment showing decline and the next 10 years showing proposed decline, that the district should consider right sizing as part of their facility planning approach. Key piece of information: when you drive around the city of Davenport, you see new houses under construction. It takes 4 new construction builds to produce 1 student enrolled in the district. When you see apartment buildings being constructed, it takes 12 apartment units to produce 1 enrolled student in the district. So physical growth doesn't necessarily equate to student body growth. This is not destiny. This course can be changed, but we are still forced to face the facts that the district has a lowered enrollment historically, and it's still slated to continue to decline. So that breakdown is expected to occur as 2,600 to 3,800 students at the elementary level, 1,200 to 1,700 students at the junior high, 70 to 80 students at the high school level. That is what they're projecting as excess capacity within the district. So building capacity study, this is a bit of a animal. So capacity study is a process where the buildings are analyzed based on what rooms are used for what purpose within the building. So there are rooms that are used for classroom purposes, for special education. There is also art, gym, music, band. When you calculate capacity, you calculate it based on the student classroom space available in the building. You don't also add in gymnasiums or cafeterias because the students are coming out of their classroom to participate in those spaces. It uses a target student capacity for each room based on either district policy or leadership recommendations. So that gives you a number of students targeted per classroom. You use that based on the quantity of classrooms. You'll end up with a capacity for each building. I will note there is an updated version of this that is loaded onto the district website as of this week. There is information that has been corrected. But in general, there is 3,000 to 5,000 additional seats of capacity within the district. Some buildings don't necessarily feel like they experience extra capacity. That's because those rooms may be currently being used for some other purpose. However, you could repurpose those to classroom space if you need to. So we have the ability to absorb more students in our building within the district. We can go ahead and move forward. Facility study. So the facility study is a process of evaluating every single building within the district. This is also a document that's on the district website. This is a 600-page document. Essentially, the buildings are analyzed in a very comprehensive way. Mechanical systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, accessibilities, roof conditions, ceilings, floors, doors, windows, exterior walls, interior walls. Every aspect is looked at and given a gradating scale. So there's spreadsheets that support this, but it creates an overall evaluation which can be found for each building. So a sample of a summary page for Sudlow on the right. This was actually a draft version, so it may not be accurate, but each component that was reviewed gets a score rating of either good, fair, or poor. And then all of those scores are averaged to create an overall building rating of good, fair, or poor. Good, fair, or poor doesn't necessarily mean the destiny of the building is do away with it or not. It's meant that in order to continue to use that building, we have to make corrections in that building to continue to use it so that it can live long and function properly. So I blasted through that really fast. I'm happy to go back and talk to it, but we were thinking that we'd like to have you guys as a group talk amongst your tables just about some of this information. What are some of your initial reactions? What does it mean to hear some of this information? If we could take 5 or 10 minutes, talk amongst yourselves, then we'll have a kind of an open room discussion after this.
I will set the time.
Yeah, TJ's got the official time.
81 slides, you said?
I don't remember how many. All right, we'll start coming back to the room as a group. Any from our tables, did anybody have any interesting observations? Was there anything surprising in the information that was encapsulated in that first portion of the presentation? Does anybody want to share?
I would really like it if you, next time, it's been 2 weeks, that information would be, you said, it was a preliminary thing, it might not be accurate. Well, we've had 2 weeks. I'd like to look at it if it would be accurate.
Which information?
Something that you had brought up that wasn't,
Which information?
I don't remember what it was, but it was the facility thing with the Sudlow up there, and you use it as an example. I get it, but is it going to be right on? It would have been nice if it had been right tonight. That's all.
That's fine. That little indicator key is to help explain how to read the document. So it's meant to be an explanatory, if that makes sense. There are 29 buildings worth of those things that you can go onto the district website, see all of them. They are accurate and up to date, so that is on there. The capacity study on the district website is up to date and accurate. Other questions? Other comments?
So, if you wouldn't mind, there are lots of people watching online, and they can only hear us if we turn the microphones on. And they text me when we don't have the microphones on.
So my question is, when I was looking up there on like the under capacity for the Buchanan school, it was only showing that it was a very small amount of under capacity. And I know that's one of the schools they were talking about closing. And that concerned me that there's such a small, drop there in full capacity. And that's one of the schools that are being shut or trying to be shut. And with that school in general, it's right next to low income housing where there's parents that don't have vehicles to get these children to school if they miss the bus. There's children that they're home by themselves in the mornings trying to get to school because their parents are working. And they wake up late, and now it's, okay, the buses already came. Now how do I get to school? Now you have children that can't make it to school, and now truancy officers are knocking on doors because it's something that's out of a parent's hand.
No, that's very good comment. I will say that capacity is only one piece of information in a bigger effort of understanding moves that get made within the district, so that is not a sole determining factor. We'll actually talk about other factors that are part of that consideration as we move forward in the presentation.
Will you also talk about the meeting that you had?
Oh, yeah, and specifically back at the back table, there was a question about how capacity was shown for Buchanan. We had a meeting with Buchanan this week and talked through understanding how that building is being used just to make sure that the data is up to date and correct for that capacity that's being shown for that.
I would also add it's important when you see capacity, and I had a conversation at one table, it really is an art, not a science. I imagine if every one of you, especially staff members, went room by room, you may pick a room here that you think should be included or not included. Understand that. We had meetings with every principal, now a second round of meetings with a couple principals to identify rooms. But even if you found, make up a number, 5 rooms that you thought should or should not have been counted, that may swing the capacity conversation by 100 to 110 students. So in the scope of 3,000 to 5,000 seats of excess capacity, even if we found 5 classrooms across all these buildings, it's not going to really impact the overall challenge we have. So appreciate, and I'm glad when you bring forward specific concerns on a building by building basis. We want this information to be as accurate as possible. And if you look at the updated information, we're listening and updating when we get new information. But also don't question, ideally, the overall capacity challenge if you find one or two things that you don't agree with, because it's not going to change the overall deficit that we have or excess capacity that we have across the district.
Yes.
Do you guys take into account when looking at capacities of the rooms, classrooms such as special education classrooms, ESL,
Yes.
connection? Obviously, everyone.
Yeah, they are. And then the other complication is if you look at 21-22 versus 22-23 versus, say, 23-24, sometimes those programs change a little bit. And so what gets identified is flex classrooms that could be either educational purpose or serve one of those specialty purposes. So that where we have flex classrooms, those get added into the capacity. So those help illustrate additional seats that are available in a building. We can't just say that every single special ed classroom, let's say, could be a general purpose classroom, because then we would have displaced special ed programming. Okay, in the interest of time, we'll keep moving on, but one thing to note is we are establishing a problem within the district, and that is that we have population loss in the district. So there is a loss of enrolled students. We have more buildings than what we need to house those students. And so the consideration is that something does have to change. It would be fiscally difficult for the district to continue to keep every single building open and operating. So, yes.
So how is the closure of these schools going to impact the class sizes?
We'll get there. We'll get there. It's in the presentation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a question as well. So there are several buildings that maybe are the same size or the same footprint. How is it that you come across one particular school to be closed versus other two maybe that are in different areas of the city? How is it that they are not like equally looked upon, I guess?
Yeah, that's a complicated one, and it's there's not an easy answer in that, because it's as we've said, there's more at play than just the capacity or the classroom count. Geographic position is a part of this, understanding the pathway of where students would go to their elementary attendance center versus their junior high versus their high school, and trying to make sure that we can account for all of the students in the district in an appropriate setting. So if you can hang with us, we're going to start talking about how the recommendation for a pathway came about, because that influences some of the changes that get employed to say that some buildings are going to have to close and others are going to have to change to be able to handle the enrollment of the students within the district. So Danielle, if you want to jump forward. So that was developed through the FMPC process, and there was a recommendation to the board. So as I mentioned, back in November, the Facility Master Plan Committee began meeting to discuss long-range planning. That committee was charged with two specific tasks. What is the best grade configuration, number of school building transitions, and pathway experience for students? And then number two, what is the best path forward to right-size the quantity of school buildings to align with current and projected student enrollments? Now keep in mind, the FMPC group did not use building names when talking about this, so it was a pathway organization, and we'll explain what that looks like, that charted a number of buildings, size of buildings, and organization of buildings. So if we want to jump forward. Again, we're sitting here in August of 22. If we jump to the next slide, we'll see that this group met from November through February with a recommendation to the board in February. There was 8 intensive committee meetings. These were well over 2 hours. There were over 50 committee members who participated, providing over 800 hours of collective effort on this. This was not an easy process. I know we have at least one two committee members in the room tonight. They will likely tell you a little bit about their experience as we speak through the night. On the website, there is a tab that is the Facilities Master Planning Committee. There is background information. All of the studies and support material can be found there. Information about the committee, the charge, norms, that is the founding information about what they are and what they're supposed to be doing, the meeting dates, the agendas. Every meeting was captured, and that presentation is on the website, as well as a summary of discussion that occurred out of those meetings. So this group started with 17 K through 8 pathways. That is, pathway meaning a organization of buildings, number of buildings and size of building and number of students within the building. So when we say grade sections, we're going to say that is the number. Each section is a classroom. So if we have a 4-section building, there's 4 classrooms per grade level. So this group started with 17 different pathway options at the elementary school level. They narrowed down their recommendation to 2 pathways. They had 3 different high school pathway options, which they narrowed down to 1 single pathway option. If we jump ahead, once they got to 3 options in their pathway, they did an internal survey just to validate where that committee was at, to ensure that the 2 leading pathways truly remained as the leading pathways. So that survey had a 65% participation rate, which was very high. It did validate that the pathway that was going to be recommended was truly where they wanted to recommend to the board. So if we jump ahead, a few criteria that were important when the Facility Master Plan Committee came to the board, they felt that these items were important in their decision making. So any solution in the district needs to have the potential to enhance educational opportunities. The number of school transitions. So transition is when a student moves from one building to the next. So whether it's elementary to junior high, or high school to, or junior high to high school, that is a transition. They felt that the fewer number of transitions was better for the student experience. And a solution that included a 5th through 8th grade junior high organization. This group felt that the 5th and 6th graders should have a non-blended experience with the 7th and 8th graders, meaning 5th and 6th educate a little bit different. They're a different age group. They work a little different in the building. So they felt that the 5th and 6th graders should be in a separate part of the building with their own experience. However, they would share in key resources and staff in the building. So shared common spaces, special programming. Impact on busing was something that group thought was important. Predictability of student experience. So when a student enrolls in the district, just understanding where their attendance center is and where the progression from one building to the next is expected to occur. The duration of time that this school is within, or the student is within a school, has an impact on education. We'll talk about that in a second. Total school size was a factor that was considered as they looked at these pathways. And then how the grade configuration can be adapted to support less densely populated areas was also an important factor. So they felt that solutions should work towards maintaining a neighborhood feel with buildings. Early education needs to be integrated into all of the elementary schools. The duration of time that a student is within a building is impactful to that student's learning and aptitude within a building. So Creating a solution where a student remains in a building for a longer period of time may help with dropout rates, retention of information, and it also, at the 6th and 8th grade, which are critical transition years, keeping those students in a building for longer gives more opportunities for the staff and student to interact, for that staff to be able to monitor and help that progress with that student. The whole district should be balanced to better separate the haves and have-nots so that we have more of a blended and equitable experience across the entire district. That balance would create better opportunity for access to programs. It would help create better funding for our school buildings, and would also create the opportunity to improve our buildings, which would give a better environment and better quality of instruction. Other important factors is understanding that improvements in the buildings within the district will help attract more students to the district. It should help retain students within the district. It's also important for attracting staff. It's hard to hire in the district. I believe there's a considerable number of open positions currently. Good quality organization of buildings and environment is important for that. Also, the fewer buildings with more sections in the building, so more grade classrooms in the building, is better for staff and curriculum because it provides more opportunities for collaboration. It gives a better ability to balance class sizes, such as when there's a bubble year where one grade level might have a higher capacity or a higher enrollment than another. It also gives the ability for teachers to help cover for one another when one's sick. If you have a 2-section building, so 2 classrooms per grade level, and one teacher is sick, now you have one teacher that's going to have to cover 2 rooms on their own. If that was a 4 or 5-section building, it becomes a little easier to handle some of those situations. So that was all information that was important to those committee members. They suggested that the grade configuration and number of buildings should be changed with one of either of 2 pathways. So one pathway was organizing the district with kindergarten through 4th grade elementary schools. This would include preschool, and 5th through 8th grade junior high schools. That pathway illustrated a reduction of school facilities from 17 elementaries to 12. These would be a combination of 4 and 5-section buildings. The predominant target was 5-track elementary schools. And then 6 intermediate schools. These elementary or intermediate schools would have about 800 students each. There was a recommendation for a second pathway, which was organizing the elementary buildings as kindergarten through 5th grade, reducing from 17 elementaries to 15 4-section elementary school buildings, and then 5 intermediate schools at about 760 students each. That committee also recommended that the 3 existing high schools would remain as is, so North, Central, and West would remain in their current configuration, and Mid-City would continue on as the specialty high school. The other thing to note is that the children's villages were not specifically discussed by that facility master plan committee. So that was the FMPC process. That is the pathway that starts to guide the decision making that will occur with how you implement changes to buildings. So I'd like to just let the tables discuss amongst themselves again, note anything that's surprising or interesting, and then we'll come back as a group and discuss. And the timer is set.
but I'm all about the grind for eternity.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise,
I'm going to call a 1-minute warning. All right. Do we want to start coming back to the room as a group? So that pathway recommendation is an interesting one to wrap your head around. Did the tables have any interesting conversations or observations out of that?
We were talking about how the comment about the haves and have-nots stuck out to us. We know that these are very difficult conversations to have, and we know that they're due to enrollment sizes has to be some type of closures within the school district. But we were discussing the last schools that were closed. I'm a lifelong community member of Davenport. I was born and raised, went through all my schooling here. And the schools I can remember that have been closed are Perry, Grant, Taylor, Johnson, Lincoln, JB, Roosevelt, the old Buchanan down on 6th Street. And the one thing that we've noticed is that all besides Grant were physically located south of Locust. And so what is it that we're going to do to continue to provide a community school for our students that do not have the access and abilities that they need to get to other school locations? At Buchanan, we call ourselves a Buchanan Bulldog family, and I would be here to advocate for my own family members as I'm going to be here to advocate for my Buchanan Bulldog family. And we know that there's a bunch of statistics, and we just hope that we continue to think about our families. As a district, we are promoting the belief system that the relationships are the most important, and we have to have those relationships in order to have learning occur. And what message are we sending to families that don't have the finances to live in other neighborhoods in our city? What message are we sending? And we want them to know that they are loved and appreciated and valued as members of our Davenport Community School District, no matter if they live south or north of Locust.
I think that's great. Yeah. Any other comments, observations?
I have a quick question. I know we were talking earlier with like the closures of the schools and stuff. With that being said, what about the schools that 50% or more of these students are actually walkers? Because I know Buchanan themselves, majority of the students are walkers. So that's going to create a whole nother problem, I feel, because there's shortage of bus drivers as it is. There's shortages of buses. So now you have 50 to 75% walkers for one school. How many more buses and drivers are you going to have to find and create to make another, how many routes to get kids where they need to go? Just in Fairmont Pines itself, you're probably going to need 3 buses just to bus all of them students that are elementary kids.
Yeah. So transportation will be a critical factor in anything that happens, and that is part of the consideration of how boundary areas would also have to change for any schools that become the attendance center in any portion of the city. So that is going to be critical information.
Can we give it up for the most well-behaved baby in the
Seriously. All right. Well, if there's no other observations, I know the tables had a lot of good conversations. Real quick, so we have this pathway recommendation. It's a number of school buildings, a target population size, so how many students per building, a total number of classrooms per building. We have to figure out how to take that pathway. So there's 2 different pathway recommendations. You have to figure out how to apply that to the buildings that exist within the district. That is not something that we as the architects at Bray make that decision. That is a series of different planning teams that have various discussions. There's meetings that occur with community leaders, city leaders, to help understand some of the implications of these decisions, as well as internal to the school district leadership and planning committee members to help understand what some of these moves are. It is very complicated. It is very difficult. Some of this is understanding what does the district look like currently. So if we look at the district makeup with the number of buildings, we talked, there's 17 elementaries, 1 K-8, 4 junior highs, 3 high schools, 1 specialized high school. If we kind of turn that to look at it a little different way, we'll see the listing of all the schools, the number of students enrolled, at least as of 21-22. We will be getting current enrollment information for the current year soon, but these charts were built on 21-22. You could see in these listings the number of additions and renovations in the years that those occurred, how many grade level classrooms there are in each building. So we start to see that in this chart form. If we jump forward, we see that for our Walcott K-8. We jump forward and see that for our 4 junior high schools, and then for our high schools, including the Mid-City High School as well. So jumping forward, what do you do with all this, and how do you start to understand this information? So here's how those buildings are positioned within the district. So you could see a kind of a dot map showing where these buildings are. If we jump forward one more, some of the information that has to get considered is any particular building currently in an area that's projected to increase or decrease in enrollment? So understanding the enrollment impact over the next 10 years for where any building is located is a factor that has to be considered. Geographic placement of a building does have an impact in decision making, not just from north of locus, south of locus, but also east to west, even from inside the urban corridor to outer edges of the district. Site size, how much property is located at each building, the quantity of classrooms, which also impacts capacity. Building improvements, how many improvements, investments were made in any particular building over the last 10 years. Building assets, how many gyms are in a building? Is there a separate gym versus cafeteria? Is there an auditorium in the building? Because those things can be complicated. If we only have a single room in a building that serves as both a gym and a cafeteria, it becomes really hard to do PE and lunch when we increase the size of any particular building. Building age has an impact. Typically that is not something that is impossible to overcome, but it's important to understand just the age of our buildings. I would say the majority of our buildings are more than 75 years old in the district. Several of our buildings are on a historic building registry, so that doesn't mean that the building can't be converted from an elementary or a junior high to something else, but it does affect the disposition of that building. You can't just tear it down. We want to make sure that our buildings can accommodate preschool too. So if they don't currently, we have to make sure we can expand that. So these factors aren't just a deciding factor that says a building should remain opened or closed. These have an impact on the considerations that get made that result in how much money has to get invested in the building to make it work for a new strategy. So some buildings may take more investment or less investment. You have to partner that with facility study information to understand deficiencies that need to be corrected or improved. So that is part of the equation, and some of this information has a bearing directly on some of those decisions. When we look at the way the buildings are organized, this diagram on the right illustrates a left-hand column, which is all of our elementary buildings. The middle column, which is kind of a teal colored, is our junior highs. And then the right-hand column in the green is our high schools. The little arrow that diagrams kind of shows where those students move from building to building. We'll just blow this up and look at it in segments. So there is not a distinct linear pathway for all of our buildings. So some of our buildings actually are feeders to multiple junior highs, and some of our junior highs are feeders to multiple high schools. One of the things that the FMPC group thought was that sometimes it's a little bit haphazard to understand where your student might be going to school as they move from elementary to junior high to high school. And so one of the things that was important to them was to see if there's a way to help clean up that path and make it more predictable and understandable. If you look on this chart, just understanding that Jackson and Madison, Jefferson and Wilson, they all send students to multiple junior high school buildings, which then result in students going to different high schools. It is understood that students can enroll in any high school within this district, but many times students do follow that path based on the location of their enrollment. If we jump to the next slide, this is kind of the bottom half of that diagram. These are the elementaries that feed into Williams and Wood and Sudlow, which then feed to Central and North. Mid-City is not a linear path. That is a specialty school, so enrollment is a little different for that building. So organization chart options. This is where there is a first stab at trying to implement one of these pathways. So there's two different options. Oh yeah, go ahead, TJ.
I want to make a distinction that I kind of picked up on our tables, and I didn't do a good enough job in the first presentation, is that everything up to this point was done through the Facility Master Planning Committee. And if you were on that committee, would you please stand up? Thank you, guys. There was a ton of work in there, so thank you for being a part of that. Yeah. Up until this point, the Facility Master Planning Committee was talking about pathways, but they never talked about buildings. We had to start somewhere, and this is where the district began to put names to a building and a pathway. So I want to make that distinction so you don't start pointing some of the questions at the Facility Master Planning Committee. They did a wonderful job helping decide the pathways, and everything up to so from here on out is where the district came in and started putting these things on. So I just want to make that.
And the other caveat that we placed when we started looking at this is a first shot out of the gate. It's not correct. It's wrong. That's why you guys are in a room here, because we need to understand the comments that weigh on the community, because it does influence how these diagrams will change and the decisions modify when it comes to a recommendation. Another thing to note is the pathway change that gets shown in these is likely not going to be attainable in one single effort. This is going to be something that the district is going to have to whittle away at in a long-range solution format. So this is going to take years to implement, and that is mostly because there is a heavy weight of cost to make these changes, but the intent is that that will leverage the operational expense within the district, which helps it become more efficient and better operationally. So this option one is the application of the pathway, which was organizing our elementary schools as K through 4. Our intermediate schools would become 5th through 8th grade. So that is 5th, 6th as a house and 7th, 8th as a house in the same building. In this option, we had to get from 17 elementary schools to 12, which means 5 of our elementary schools would need to close. That also means that the remaining 12 will require some level of investment to both improve the quality, quantity, function, and feature of the spaces within the building to handle the population based on these changes. In this particular mode, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. This one did implement using Walcott as a junior high building. This one suggested that potentially Jackson and Jefferson could be sites that could be implemented as junior highs, or those junior highs could remain where they are. It also considered that a new junior high could be constructed in the northeast portion of the city. So if we scroll to the next slide, this looked at breaking the district down to 2 elementary schools, which would feed each junior high school. So you would have Buffalo and Bluegrass as K through 4, 4-section buildings, housing the elementary portion of what would feed Walcott Junior High as a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th junior high school. And that would be a pathway that predominantly feeds towards West High School. For SMART, either Monroe or Hayes would remain as a expanded building, a K through 4, 4-track elementary, and then Wilson would remain, and it would become a 5-track elementary. Both those buildings would either flow towards SMART Junior High, or potentially SMART could be relocated to a new property. That SMART Junior High would then also be a feeder to West High School. If we jump to the next, Eisenhower and Harrison potentially could be the 2 buildings which feed the new junior high school. Eisenhower would be expanded to become a 5-section K through 4 elementary. Harrison would be expanded to become a 5-section elementary, both feeding this new junior high as a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th organization, becoming a North High School feeder. It was noted that when discussing this, that either Eisenhower or Harrison or both could be potentially relocated to a different site. And then as feeders through the Wood Junior High, Fillmore and Truman would be adapted to become 5-section elementary school buildings, both of them feeding to Wood Junior High as the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, which would be a North High School feeder. It would still be board policy that students enrolled at junior high could elect any high school that they wish to go to. So that's the option one. If you switch to the next view, it kind of shows on a map view, which shows in yellow the proposed junior high school locations, and then what is shown in blue is the elementaries which support those building locations. Then the next option was, how do you get the K-5, 6, 8 organization? So that's kindergarten through 5th grade elementary school buildings with 6th through 8th junior high school buildings. In this particular organization that came out of the FMPC, it was a change from 17 to 15 elementary schools and then 5 junior high schools. So in order to get that 5th, Walcott was identified as being used as a junior high school building at the 6th, 8th grade levels. So if we expand this used a model which utilized 3 elementaries to support each junior high. So Fillmore would become a 4-section K through 5 elementary. Harrison would become a 4-section K through 5 elementary. Truman would become a 4-section K through 5 elementary. These would be the 3 elementaries which feed through to Wood Junior High, now serving as a 6 through 8 building, which feeds towards north. Adams, Madison, and Wilson were identified as possibly becoming 4-section elementary schools. Those buildings would be then in a path which feeds towards Williams Junior High. Likely Williams students will need to split either to north or to west. If we jump to the next, Bluegrass, Buffalo, and Jackson would become 3 buildings that are also 4-section elementary school buildings. They would flow towards Walcott if Walcott was adapted to a junior high building. That path predominantly feeds towards North High School. And then looking at SMART, we have Hayes, Jefferson, and Monroe. We could probably switch to the next slide. Those would be 3 elementary buildings, 4-section. Those flow to SMART Junior High, which would serve as a 6 through 8. SMART Junior High students predominantly would either enroll at West or Central. And then Eisenhower, Garfield, and McKinley would operate as 4-section elementary schools, those feeding to Sudlow Junior High School, Central High School becoming the 9 through 12 high school. Mid-City would remain as it is. All elementary schools would be expanded to accommodate 2 preschool classrooms, and likely the children's villages, a decision would have to be made on those facilities. So with the 15 buildings shown here, the map doesn't look significantly different than it does today because we're cutting 2 buildings. That is a lot. It is a hard diagram to figure out. As we said, it's likely not the correct answer, but it's somewhere we have to start to be able to foster these conversations. So we'd like to have you guys talk through that, create some more discussion topics from your table, and then we'll come back as a group in about 10 minutes.
I need to clarify something on option K458, option 1, thank you. It says Williams Junior High on it. The proposal is to move Williams Junior High to where Jefferson is and renovate Jefferson. So that when we updated our slides, it doesn't say that. So it looks like we're building a junior high at Jackson and then a new one in Prairie Heights and taking out the inner part of the city. There's actual reinvestment at the Jefferson site. That's when you see Williams Junior High, it's actually relocated to Jefferson Elementary School. One of the things that we're going through this process that's very difficult by the location of our spaces, our junior highs, 3 of our junior highs are a block off of Division. That's what makes it very difficult to go to the different high schools. So just wanted to clarify that. I'm going to add another minute to the clock because I took their time.
Consider that the 1 minute warning then. Okay, we'll start coming back as a group. And then I think you're up after this, right? All right, so several of us has been walking around table to table through the night, and I know there's really great conversations. This is a lot to bite off and comprehend, so I would welcome comments from anybody at any table, because you have board members here, you have people that are on some of our planning teams here, and they are really begging to hear your feedback, because it is important and does affect how these diagrams are going to change as we move forward. So Out of the gate, anybody wish to raise their hand and volunteer? Yes.
So we had a conversation about just staffing numbers and everything like that, and how it seems like every year a lot of teachers are switched to different building, different grade level. In theory, would this plan create more stability for the teachers where if it's a 4-section building, like you will be staying there if you want to?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to that answer, and one is when you close a building, you're not eliminating those staff positions because you're growing another building. So we need that staff at these other buildings. The benefit to this is it should create more stability that gives us 2 things. More job security in the positions that are held in the buildings. And also it should give us new and improved facilities to help attract more staff as well. Because we understand the district is running short on staff as well. So
Think at a really simple level, and we had this conversation at one of the tables. If we have an elementary school attendance area and we currently have 2 classrooms of a grade level, first grade, and we have a small attendance area, right, for 2 classrooms per grade level, the dynamics of the residential housing and the transient nature of that boundary dictates how many staff members we need. As soon as we make that boundary larger, it's less likely that we're going to have as much fluctuation. Let's say if we have 4 classrooms of first grade, and now we have the ability to also average those class sizes out better because we've got a larger number of first graders in that case attending the school. So they're bigger in that case in terms of number of classrooms per grade level. Really does help in terms of averaging out class size and providing more consistency for the educators in that building.
yes, sir.
So when you bring up larger boundary areas, what are those proposed boundaries? Because if you start shipping kids from Walcott to Davenport to Jackson or whatever, we already have enough kids in our town leaving due to decisions that the Davenport schools have made to Durant, and people will do the exact same thing. So there's already people also from Bluegrass that are leaving. So what do those boundaries look like? I mean, we got projections here of buildings and everything else. We got to have some sort of plan.
Yeah, boundaries have to follow specific solutions. So once the board decides on a pathway, what grade configuration, what general moves, then the effort of rebounding begins. We have not redrawn every boundary based on every different iteration of over time as to when the change would be made. So in general, I don't know, TJ, if you have any different thoughts on that. The boundary discussion has to happen after a solution is landed on.
So there's mapping tools that show the number of student households throughout the district. And we look at that in a map form, and we can then start to make that boundary respond, knowing, for example, if you mention like the Jackson, we know how many students we need to park there, and then that starts to affect where you're catching the students that need to be enrolled to fill that population. What happens then is that boundary is going to shift from one model to the next because the population size does change depending on which option you're going on. Yes, ma'am.
With the model for the K4, 5, 8 option, saying it's going to take years, I mean, that seems clear. They're going to have to redo a lot of things. How might a kid be impacted? Say they're a kindergartner at Buchanan this year. Buchanan closes. Is that going to be like step 1 and then those kids go to Jackson, but then Jackson becomes a 5-8 school and then those kids have to then potentially be shifted to Wilson? I mean, are kids going to be impacted more than once as these phases happen?
Potentially, yes.
I think the hope when redrawing the boundaries would be to try to predict as many of those things as possible. There's a lot of ways to do that. It's to make a one-time move and then commit to them staying until they transition to a junior high. Doesn't matter what grade that would be at. The other way to do it is to redraw the boundary and begin just not allowing kindergarten at school A, have them start in their new school. And so then again, you're affecting less students as we get to that final transition. So there's a lot of different kind of subtle levers and knobs to push and pull and twist. It'll really change building by building, region by region, depending on where a student attends today and where they would attend in the final boundary solution. Is there a step in the middle? Hard to say today, but I'll go out on a limb and say, no, the district will do everything in their power to limit that multiple change within an elementary experience. Is that fair, TJ? And these are all really good considerations. This is emotional stuff, and it's hard for everybody. I mean, we have a really hard time when we sit down and try to work through these because it's not easy. But we had a conversation at the table is we always have to kind of go back and ground ourselves, and we have a need. We have a lot of excess capacity. We need to achieve operating efficiencies to provide students and staff with more resources and reallocate the finances we're spending operating 3,000 to 5,000 excess seats of capacity. Let's use those dollars and put them back in an impactful way to help kids and to help staff. Not an easy discussion, but an important one. And your voice at this meeting is extremely helpful as we take this to the next step.
You said that this plan will take years to implement. At what point in this plan would a building be closed? Are we looking at a year, 2 years, 5 years? And I know it depends on which option's chosen, but
I've answered this question at 4 tables this evening, so I will answer it, and then TJ will correct me. How about that? All right, so really macro level, as you saw on the map tonight, we've really been at this for over a year already. By the end of this calendar year, we'll be going to the board with not only all the feedback from this group, the work of the FMPC, but the community survey results. That's the one that's getting mailed to every home. The board will have that information by the end of the calendar year. It'll be the board's decision not to put the 3 that are here on the spot because we're not going to do that. But the 3 of them and their colleagues will have a decision to make at that point about whether they want to close schools without making a capital investment. As we talk, we have a lot of excess capacity that in theory today we could redraw some boundaries likely within the city. I think that's where the likely area is, and close a school or 2 somewhat soon to begin achieving that savings, operational savings. So that's kind of step 1 or phase 1 would be that decision the board will be considering at the end of the calendar year. Phase 2 is which pathway do they want to explore or commit to, K5, 6-8 or K4, 5-8. So that's a decision the board will have to make. And then what capital investment would be the first phase of that? That likely capital investment, I'll go out on a limb and don't ever hold me to this, but that's going to likely take 3 to 5 years by the time you work through all of the different iterations of decision making, engineering, construction, et cetera, et cetera. So that process will take much more time. Did I get close there? Anything you'd like to add?
I will add one thing, and I'll just strengthen what you're saying. It is the direction of our school board. This is something that we've been putting off for probably 6-7 years now. And our school board is very dedicated to making sure that our finances are never in the spot that they were before. And one of the ways that we achieve that is by operational efficiencies. And this is one of those ways. To heat and cool a building is anywhere from $300,000 to $1 million a year, depending on. And so think about those operational savings every year. And if we have the ability to improve the educational experience for our students, this very, very hard, difficult thing is what we've got to get through. And this is very difficult for our school board to do. And I don't want to speak for them, but they know it has to be done. We should have made these decisions all along the way, and we didn't as a district. While our school board is not responsible for that, it is their responsibility, and they are taking it very seriously. And if I'm going to channel the inner eyeballs that are staring at me right now, my bosses over here, there will be action at the end of this school year going into next school year. And we are very committed. I'm speaking to my staff members in here now. We're very committed to being transparent, communicating with you, because that is a very unsettling thing to go through what we're talking about right now, but we care about you. We're committed to you, and we want to make sure that you know that. So as we go along in this decision-making process, you will be communicated with clearly. That is my expectation as we go forward. So just kind of beef up that message a little bit, but good job.
So,
One last question.
Yes,
The final decision is made by our elected school board,
correct.
nobody else.
That is correct. And that there would be a recommendation to the board that is proposed for them to consider. They could make changes to that recommendation as well. So the board has a lot on their plates. Your feedback is important because it influences how the proposed models change before they get to the board. So that is good. Another thing to keep in mind is we're talking about likely anywhere from 20 building changes, with the elementary, junior high. This is a big dollar sign, right? And a burning question in a lot of people's mind is, all right, this is going to take 3 to 5 years. You're going to save maybe $1 million a year by closing a building, but how does that pay for the cost? It is complicated. The district has very many funding vehicles. We have a person with us tonight that is going to give a little bit of background on how you can achieve these projects by using the district's tools of finance. So, Susan?
Yeah. Suzanne Gerlach with Public Financial Management. Yeah, that'd be great. Stand here, hold my microphone. That'd be I can still talk one-handed, so I'm good. As long as I have one hand free, I'm okay. Suzanne Gerlach with Public Financial Management, PFM Financial Advisors. We are the financial advisor for the district and have been for many years. We help with financial planning. So tonight we're going to go over a very much high-level 101 discussion about what buckets of money are used for operation, what buckets of money are used for capital projects, and then the different financing sources. When we're talking about this master facility plan, how do we pay for it? We don't know what it is yet. We don't know how much it costs yet, but we do know sort of the general plan of the buckets of funding and how we're going to get that started. So we're going to go through each of those tonight. So we're going to talk a little bit about just Iowa public school financing, just a little bit of the funding sources, all the different buckets. I call them buckets because, this bucket has rules, that bucket has rules. Operating versus capital funding, very different rules associated with the different funding sources. The statewide penny sales tax, or the SAVE fund that everybody pays when they go buy anything at the store, you pay that penny statewide. The PEPL, or property, plant, and equipment levy. And then lastly, general obligation, or GO bonds. So when you hear GO bonds, GO bonds, we'll talk a little bit about that. So this fancy dandy chart shows all of the red across the top are all of the different ways that the school receives money. The school receives finances from the sales tax. That goes straight to the sales tax fund and it has very specific uses, and it's a capital fund. The federal funds go to the general fund. State aid goes to the general fund. Property taxes go to both the general fund and the PEPL fund. And then the income surtax goes to the PEPL fund as well. And instructional support levy is a tax, also goes into the general fund. So if we go to the next slide. So that general fund in the middle, that's what pays for the teachers. That's what pays for, is operating costs, right? So let's go through operating costs versus capital costs. Operating costs, salaries and benefits for teachers, administrators, and staff, right? That's a cost of operations paid for by the general fund. Curriculum, supplies, and other educational needs. That's an operating supply that's paid for by the general fund. Utilities and general operations of a building, right? Utilities, insurance, those kinds of things, operating costs paid for by the general fund. And so 80% of general fund expenditures are related to salaries and benefits, which is probably no surprise. It's just an estimate for statewide in the state of Iowa for all school districts. About 80% of general fund expenditures are related specifically to staff. Now, capital costs, right? Building a building, maintaining a school building, facilities, and parking lots. You don't think about parking lots, you don't think about the roof, all those kind of things. Not just building it, but maintaining it and keeping it in good working order. Capital equipment, this can be anything from buses to sports equipment, musical instruments, those kind of things. And then your athletic facilities and related sites as well. There are three primary sources of capital funding, and that's what we're going to look at specifically tonight. And these are the three ways that we're going to go about financing the capital plan that comes from the work from the master facility plan. The first would be that statewide penny. That is a statewide program. The school gets funding every year for that. Every time you go to the Walmart and buy what you buy, the pennies go into the program and it's distributed statewide. And it can only be used for capital expenses. Can't be used to pay teachers. PEPL, that property, plant, and equipment levy, that's part of the tax levy. That's a set levy every year. That's part of the tax levy. And then general obligation bonds would be the last option. So we're going to go specifically through each three of those so everybody understands sort of what the funding source is, what it can be used for going forward. So the statewide penny or the sales tax, right? SAVE bonds. SAVE is short for, the state likes to give everything a fancy name in education, right? So it's the Secure and Advanced Vision for Education is what SAVE stands for, but everybody calls it the statewide penny. Revenues are collected statewide, and they are distributed on a per pupil basis. So every student in the state of Iowa gets the same dollar funding per student per year in every district. So it's based on last year's certified enrollment. And it's an estimate of what's going to be collected for those retail sales. SAVE funds can be spent as defined by the school district's voter-approved revenue purpose statement. The district has a current revenue purpose statement that was passed back in 2013, and all that small font right there. Hopefully this will be emailed or is on the website so you can read the small font. But it goes through December 31st, 2029, and the district will need to go back and vote. And I don't remember, TJ, when the plan was off the top of my head to go back and vote. March. So next March, the voters of the district will become and asked, and there'll be a new revenue purpose statement that says, okay, we're going to use it for these things. And pretty much it's buildings, right? It's everything we talked about, all the capital uses that might be property tax relief, buildings, all that kind of stuff. So how much money does the school district get for SAVE? And we did just get the FY23 estimates, and so I apologize I didn't put those in there for tonight. But last fiscal year, the statewide funding per pupil was $1,116 per pupil. So based on the enrollment for the district, that was $17.5 million last year. So that's a pretty significant funding source. And right now, the FY23 revenue assumption, so we have a cash flow, right? We look at that 17.5 million and between now and the next 20 years, how much is available and how do we think it's going to grow? We have to make some assumptions on enrollment, right? Because we're hearing that enrollment's been declining, so we're assuming a decline of 200 students per year as a conservative estimate, and we're assuming just 1% growth in retail sales tax, or that word recession out there everybody keeps whispering about, but inflation's a real thing, so we're just assuming just a small growth in statewide retail sales. The primary use of funds currently is sort of a pay-as-you-go for capital projects for this sort of updating and maintenance of existing buildings, and there are two series of bonds that were issued back in 2012, 13, 14, I can't remember. There were two series of bonds issued that are going to be maturing in 23 and 24. So currently $2.3 million in debt service and just $1.2 million in debt service in the next fiscal year that will be maturing in 2024. Then there's no debt on the books for the district, and we're starting with a fresh, clean slate. We've reserved about $7 million a year for $3 million for technology, 2.5 for just miscellaneous capital outlays, and then the debt service, obviously. And so if I just run the numbers and say, okay, what do we think we can borrow? I think you can borrow $100 million against SAVE over the next 20 years, and that'll get you pretty far. Unfortunately, buildings cost a lot. So depending on which path we choose, that sounds like a really big number until we look at a middle school, $60 million, and elementary schools, $40 million. Or in renovation to the high school, could be even more than that. So, we're talking about big numbers. So this isn't like personal finance, right? This is big buildings. Okay, so that's the SAVE fund. So that would be the first option, right? Before we're going to go hit a tax rate, before we go ask for voter approval, we're going to use the funds that the district already has. And because the district has kind of been patiently waiting to get to this point, there is some cash in the SAVE fund as well that will be used, and then we'll leverage what we can borrow in the SAVE fund, that $100 million. And then the next in line is PEPL, right? So we have the SAVE fund, $100 million. In PEPL, this is a proper, there's two different levies that are specifically related to the PEPL fund. There is a board approved levy that is 33 cents that can be levied by the board approval with the budget process. And then there is a voter approved, the voters of the district, whether you remember or not, you approved $1.34 as a voted PEPL levy. And the current voted PEPL levy, it's a 10-year vote. So every time every school district has to go back every 10 years and re-vote. So the current PEPL levy goes through June 30th, 2029. And so that's based on property taxes, right? So property taxes is is taxable valuation divided by 1,000 times the tax rate, right? So when you look at taxable valuations, $5.1 billion tax base for the Davenport School District, pretty big number. Take that $5.1 billion, divide by 1,000 times $1.64, the district this year will receive $8.5 million in PEPL, right? Now, the board approved levy and the voter approved levy have different rules. If the school district wanted to issue GO bonds paid for by the PEPL levy, you can only do that and pay for it with the $1.34. That 33 cents is specifically for other uses. It's only the $1.34 that the voters have approved that can be used to pay for debt service out of the PEPL fund. And there is currently no debt out of the PEPL fund. And there are other sort of miscellaneous things that PEPL is a really good, it's intended to be property, plant, and equipment, roofs, maintenance of buildings, HVAC, all those kind of things. So currently in the cash flow, we have $2 million for support services and $5 million for CIP for those capital upgrades to the different buildings and facilities in the district. And so I looked at, okay, so we only have till 2029. This is a lot shorter timeline. So I said SAVE has, like, we'd probably go first, but honestly, we're probably gonna go to PEPL first because we only have till 2029, right? So if we were to go issue bonds this year, like I think I did a March 1st, 23 bond issue, 35 million available in PEPL with that $1.34. So $135 million so far for all the keeping track, and we haven't levied an additional tax yet. That's within all the existing capacity the district has. And then last is every school district, this is the big one, this is the GO bonds, right? GO bonds. GO bonds require a 60% supermajority yes vote from the district voters. And a GO bond must be repaid within 20 years. That is a state law. The maximum has to be 20 years or less. And there are two statutory limits for that tax rate for a GO bond. If the district would just come to the voters and say, okay, we want to do these bonds, and just ask one question of the voters, it would be $2.70 as the maximum tax rate that could be levied. There is also a $4.05 maximum tax levy that schools can ask, but it has to be also voter approved with a supermajority. So if $2.70 generates enough extra money to finance this master facility plan, then we would just come to the voters with one question. Will you approve this amount of bonds, knowing that we only have $2.70 to pay for it? If the price tag comes back and we need more than $2.70, we're going to be asking two questions on that ballot. First, can we do these bonds? And second, can we levy the 405? It's two questions that need a supermajority 60% yes vote. Now, GO bonds, does that mean you have to levy a 405? If you give approval to the board to levy a 405, it means they can. They have the legal authority to levy the 405, but they don't have to levy, right? So I'm not showing you any numbers here tonight because we don't have numbers. As soon as we actually have a plan, we have a master facility plan, we have the buildings we have a sort of the timeline. I mean, once we have all that detail, it's going to be my job. You'll probably see me again. We'll come back and we'll run through exactly when we're going to issue bonds, exactly what the tax rate impact would be, all of those kind of things. But this is just, like I said, that high overview tonight. GO bonds can be abated by other sources. You can use those SAVE revenues to pay for GO bonds. So say that statewide penny went up more than 1%, and we're not planning to issue any more bonds out of SAVE, you could use that money to pay for GO bonds. GO bonds can be paid off early, right? Because if property taxes, if those taxable valuations of the district continue to rise over time, and there's more money generated, $2.70 today, and tomorrow my $2.70 doubles, right? The taxable valuation increases, I have more money available. We can pay off those bonds early with cash out of the debt service fund as well. So, okay, so how much can we issue? How much do we have? What's our credit limit, right? If we're going to go max out the credit card, what's our credit limit? In Iowa, school districts are limited on how much debt they can issue based on what's called a constitutional debt limit. A constitutional debt limit is a legal debt authority that's 5% of the 100% actual valuation, right? So all principal outstanding on the following debt counts against that legal debt limit. All GO bonds, right, which there aren't any right now. All PEPL GO capital loan notes, there aren't any of those right now. All save revenue bonds, even though they're a revenue bond and they're not a general obligation of the district, they do count because our state legislature hasn't said they don't. So we have to count them. And any capital leases. So if the district has a technology lease for Chromebooks or iPads or anything like that, that would count. If there's a capital lease for buses or copiers or anything like that, any capital leases, those would count against the limit as well. So right now, the 100% assessed, and I'm not going to get into a lot of property like the valuations and all that tonight, but assessed value is not what you pay taxes on. You pay taxes on a taxable value. So when we come back next time, we'll have a conversation about that. But just know that the assessed value of the district is $8.2 billion versus the $5 billion taxable valuation, right? So this is based on assessed value before any rollbacks are applied. So 5% of the district's 100% assessed value, $413 million. That is legally the maximum amount of debt that the Davenport School District can have outstanding at any time. And of that $413.8 million, currently the debt outstanding is $3.5 million. So that debt will be completely paid off and will be zero on June 1st, 2024. And those are those save revenue bonds. So right now, the net legal debt capacity is $410 million, right? So, okay. So not knowing what our price tag is going to be, I did some quick back of the napkin. Okay, so we have $5.1 billion tax base, my taxable valuation divided by 1,000 times my tax rate, and I know that we're at the 270. So I didn't calculate the 405 because I don't know if we need it yet. Fingers crossed, 270 we'll start with there. So if we did $1.35 debt service levy tax rate, $87.3 million, right? A $2.70 tax rate, almost $175 million for GO bonds. That's how much I think could be funded for projects. Now, that assumes one big bond issue. All of my numbers here assume one big bond issue. That's not how we're probably going to tackle these projects. We're probably going to do them over time. You heard 3 to 5 years. It's going to be phased. That means that the plan of finance is going to have to match the master facility plan. The district only has so long to spend the money once they borrow it. And so there will be a plan, and we'll go through that individually. But $175 million and $135 million, right? So that's $300 million that we have on the table to pay for things. So I don't know if there's any questions specifically about Finance 101. If anybody's riveted by, school finance, I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards as well. But
does the school district work with the city of Davenport to put growth in the city? Instead of, example, everything north of the Interstate 80, all that brand new stuff is all going to the North Scott School District, not to Davenport. Why don't we have a Davenport city with a school district in it, get the development in the town of Davenport to where the funds stay here? And I know that's nothing as a school board and anything can do, but us as people of Davenport should be on our city administrators to not put growth in somebody else's school district.
Yeah, and that's valuation growth is your friend. I will just say valuation growth is your friend. It's everybody's friend.
And you raise a comment that is kind of paramount to the enrollment projections. So one of the reasons that Davenport as a city seems to be population number stable, if not growing, but enrollment declining, is because we have a lot of people that are aging in place. Well, if we start to attract more businesses and place them in Davenport, we both enhance the income growth potential that feeds the district, but it also provides more households of workers in families, with students, that will change the course for the city. And so the demographer said, this is not destiny. You can change the prediction, but it is going to take work, and it's going to take more than just the school district to do that. It does take the investment of developers, city officials, planners to make that improvement.
To follow up on that, I know our city is looking to develop towards the western part of the city, exactly what you're talking about, the next round of, I don't know what infrastructure that would attract businesses like that. I believe it's along the 280 corridor.
280 corridor. Correct.
When Bray did work with each city's administration to where are the future sites, and that was discussed. So thank you for that feedback.
So the Finance 101 is important because it starts to talk to what kind of money is available to solve these problems. As we mentioned, we likely cannot solve the whole model all in one shot. We will have to break this in phases. So moving forward from here, it is a process of taking your feedback and comments. Danielle, if you actually jump 1 or 2 slides ahead, there's a comment section for anybody that's watching online, anybody that logs on to the district website and looks into master planning tab. There's a feedback section. We need to gather that feedback because it does help influence the way we start to predict this. What's happening next is refinement and revision of the things that we talked about tonight, and then strategizing what is the first phase of potential implementation of a master plan look like, so that at the same time that we make a recommendation to the school board for a master plan, we also understand what the first step of that master plan is, understanding that it has to work within the fiscal capacity of the district.
With that being said, we have kept you here very long. We really appreciate all of the feedback that we're received. I heard some excellent ideas, points of consideration. And as we move forward, September 5th, our board is going to review the survey that's going to go to every household. And the survey is going to be a mixture of the information that you heard here. So we really need your help to get feedback on that survey. We want as much as we possibly can in that. An outstanding return rate would be 20%. So let's in Davenport, to educators is terrible, but in terms of survey, that's outstanding results. Well, let's really get as many voices in this as possible. For us, the phases of how this operates is greatly dependent upon the dollars that are going to be available, and that survey is going to help test that as well, because we want to improve the educational environments for our students as fast as possible. So on behalf of our school board members, on behalf of our internal team, I want to thank you guys so much for spending the afternoon with us, and really your sheets are incredibly important to us, and spread the word about the contact form that we have on our website. It doesn't have a lot of participation with it, and we want as many voices on there as possible. So again, thank you for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. And I know I'll be sticking around if you have questions or comments. So thank you very much, and have a great night.